Morning, everybody. Welcome to Unity Spiritual Center. This is our last summer Sunday. Hey, you're lucky to be here. We have one service, and that is all. See you next week for 2. We're going to get you warmed up this morning. Just have a couple sing-alongs, and we're going to do a little bit of God in everything. We're going to get ready, my soul. Daniel name on here. Get ready for this whole morning. to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of love. Get ready, my soul. Everything I've ever done, everything I've ever seen, everything I've lost or won, everything I've ever dreamed has brought me here to the present moment here, to a new beginning here, where I'm seeing life so clearly now. So get ready, my soul. I'm dying in. Get ready, my soul. I'm dying in to the sweetest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of love. Get ready, my soul. 'Cause here I go, deeper, deeper, deeper than I've ever been before. Here I go, closer, closer, closer to my sacred source. Here I go, deeper, deeper, deeper than I've ever been before. Here I go, closer, closer, closer to my sacred source. So get ready, my soul. I'm dying in. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of love. Get ready, my soul. So get ready, my soul.
Well, good morning. And welcome to everyone here, as well as those joining us online, to Unity Spiritual Center, where our mission is transforming lives and inspiring people to make a positive difference in the world. My name is Mary Teresa True, and I'm your platform assistant today. Please take a moment right now to silence your cell phones. And before you do so, please tell the world that you're here by checking in online to let them know that we are live. We want to begin our time together by sharing our opening affirmation. I'll say it once and then ask you to repeat it with me. There is only one presence and one power active in my life and in the universe, God the Good. Together? There is only one presence and one power active in my life and in the universe, God the Good. This morning we will hear from Sean and, I'm already getting ahead of myself. We're going to hear from Gary, and I understand it's the fifth of our 5 principles, correct? Yes. And Jane, are you doing you're doing the meditation this morning, and we are musically blessed by the rights again. I love it. I was listening to him earlier, and it's fabulous today. And now we're ready to sing our community song.
I'd love for you to stand if you can. We're going to sing God You Are a Little Bit. are. Every midnight, God you are. Every moment, every second of my life. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. God you are, every sunrise, God you are, every moon glow, God you are, every starshine and every inch of earth and sky, God you are, every springtime, God you are, every snowfall, God you are, every season, every second of my life. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. 'Cause you are the very breath I breathe. With your perfect love created me. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you.
Good morning. I am Jane Simmons, and I am going to do the announcements today. So welcome to $1 Million Announcements. Who wants to be a millionaire? So I'm going to give you the questions and 4 possible answers, and then I'm inviting you to just shout out the answer you think is right. Ready? When is the last day to sign up for our fall commitment series, What's in the Way is the Way? Is it next Sunday? Was it last Sunday? Is it, who needs to sign up anyway? Or is it today? Today! Yes, it is today. And you will hear more about that in a few minutes, so stay tuned. Which class is Reverend David teaching starting this Tuesday, September 10th? From 10 a.m. to 11:30. Is it the Prayer of Prayers, How to Be a Ninja, Klingon for Beginners, or Harry Potter History? It's the Prayer of Prayers. It starts this Tuesday at 10 a.m. And this, oh, there it is. It's this Tuesday. And this is the Lord's Prayer in Klingon for any of you who are interested. What exciting annual event is happening this Thursday, September 12th at Unity Spiritual Center? Is it a prayer vigil, a canned food drive, a labyrinth walk, or World Day of Prayer?
All of the above.
That's right. That was a trick question because it's all of the above, and you can be involved in many ways. You can come between 2 and 5 on Thursday and be a part of the prayer vigil, and you can join in for half an hour, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the whole time, whatever you want. Then we'll have the meditation following that. Then we'll walk the labyrinth with the canned goods around the labyrinth. We'll be blessing the food as we walk, and then it will go to second harvest. And the best part of all is it will be complete just in time for choir practice. So anybody who wants to do both, come on down. What is the Alternatives Violence Project next weekend all about? Is it conflict resolution, increasing communication skills, affirmation, cooperation, all of the above and more? That's right, all the above and so much more. So there is an 18-hour basic workshop next Wednesday, September 13th through 15th. Today is the very last day to register for that. Friday the 13th, that's right, yes. I just returned from 3 days inside of Coyote Ridge Correctional Institute Center, and I was facilitating, along with 2 other facilitators, a 18-hour workshop for some of the men who are incarcerated in there. And I have to tell you, after that 3 days, I remembered why I love this work so much. And so we're also are invited in Geiger. We're starting to figure out how we're going to go in there and do it. We're also working with a high school and working with kids. And so if that's something that appeals to you, if you have any interest at all in doing prison work or working with youth and helping them to learn these skills, AVP may be for you. And then the first step is to take a basic workshop that we're doing next week in order to start the training to become a facilitator. But you don't have to be a facilitator to take the training, just come and do it. It's just good information and skills on its own. So, but today's the final day to let us know if you're going to come. What does the letter Q in the Q process stand for? Is it chi, quintessential, quest, quantum? And the answer is quantum. Yes, you can take a quantum leap in your transformative journey through the Q process. And it's next Saturday with Dr. Gary, and I will be there too, starting at 8:45 a.m. And on that same day, Sisters in Spirit will be meeting at 1 o'clock in the youth area. September 15th is a special day for what reason? We go back to 2 services. It's Prince Harry's birthday. A community member orientation is scheduled, and the Sunday morning messages on the new series will begin.
Back to 2 services.
They are all correct. It is indeed Prince Harry's birthday. The Sunday morning talks will begin based on the book, What's in the Way, and we'll go back to 2 services, the first at 9, second at 11, and the between services meditations will begin again as well. Next Sunday is a very auspicious day because after the second, 2 services. After the second service, there is a community member orientation scheduled with Dr. Gary and Amber McKenzie. Take your involvement deeper. We're almost there. You're doing great. Mary Teresa True and the chaplain team will be leading a meditation class on Wednesdays from 6 to 7, starting September 18th. Where will it be held? Is it the sanctuary, the fellowship hall, the chapel, the fireside room? The answer is the chapel. Join Mary and some of our chaplains on Wednesdays from 6 to 7 in the chapel to practice a variety of different kinds of meditations. It will run for 7 weeks, and you can attend any of those classes. Each one is a standalone. Who is our special guest at the Earth and Spirit Festival on September 28th? Is it Frodo Baggins, Matthew Fox, your cousin Dave, or the royal family? Matthew. Well, they might all show up, but for sure Matthew Fox will be there. One Piece, Many Paths and Unity Spiritual Center are co-hosting the Earth and Spirit Festival right here on Saturday, September 28th. It's part of the Compassion Games. There is a table in the foyer that we are asking you to visit so that you can see all the information, which includes service opportunities, ways to do things out into the world that are making a difference, and also to get your tickets for Matthew Fox. Don't delay on that. You are all millionaires in my book. Oh, it's the community update. For today's community update, Al Koenigsfeldt and I would like to bring you up to date on the fall commitment program that is beginning this week. As you heard, it's based on a book by Mary O'Malley called What's in the Way is the Way. You'll need a copy of the book to participate. And are there any left in the bookstore, Linda? Where are you? Two left in the bookstore. You can also get it from Amazon. This week will just be the introduction, so if you don't have the book yet, you can still get in on it. And if you do have the book, please read up to the end of the introduction before attending your group. And starting next week, the next 6 Sunday lessons will all be based on the book, will be in alignment with the small group discussion material. And today is the very last day to sign up for a group after service if you've not already done so. Al will be hanging out in the foyer at a sign-up table if you have any questions. If you are a facilitator, I have all of your facilitator guides and supplies needed in the staff area. Now, Al is going to give us some information about the groups.
Good morning. All right, first of all, what the heck is with the small group stuff? I know I've confused the heck out of some of you because we had spirit groups and we had small groups. Let's just consider that they're all the same because our spirit groups are going to be part of this 7-week program. Second of all, I could really use a couple more facilitators. We did our best totals on Saturday, and I think I've probably still got about a dozen people that need a home. So if you would like to facilitate, if you would like to host, please see me at the table outside. So why do we do this? Well, first of all, the purpose of spirit groups is to get to know one another. If you're new to the congregation, you get in a spirit group, you get to know 10 or 12 people really well over the course of several weeks, and then you can talk to them once we're after the service. And then you can go and join a different group and get to know another 10 or 12 people. It's that idea of being able to greet everybody. The second one is, obviously, Dr. Gary had talked last week about the importance on the fourth principle of having spiritual tools. This is going to be one. We share, probably half this congregation has gone through the Q process. We all do the prayer and meditations. And this new book is another idea of what to do when it looks like the world is against you. What do you do when there's something other than God that seems to be going on? We have another tool. So please, if you have not signed up, or if you have signed up, let me put it this way, if you only signed up on a paper that said, yes, I would like to join a spirit group, and you have not signed up for a specific group on a specific day, please see me at the table afterwards. Thank you so much.
As we were sitting there, Sean said, let's go. And I said, no. And I had to look at Gary, and then he gave me the nod. Sean, you were right on that one, honey.
Rarely do I do.
My soul sings out to you, my love. My soul sings out to you.
let's breathe in those beautiful words. My soul sings out. Feel that. Feel your heart opening up to this deeper dimension within you that is eternally awaiting your recognition. And as we do, we begin to focus on the breath, moving in and out. And as we join together in meditation, I would invite you to bring into your heart someone that you know that is in need of prayer support. And if you choose to say their name out loud, you can go ahead and do that. And so we open ourselves to this deeper source, knowing that the truth is we are all expressions of that one, the one presence, the one power here to make a difference in our world. And as we open our hearts in gratitude for this truth, we sink our awareness deep, deep within. And we allow this feeling of gratitude to begin to warm our hearts, fill our bodies with this high vibration of appreciation. And as we do, we create a coherent, energetic field together of peace. And so we breathe it in. And as we breathe out, we begin to express it into the world. Breathe in the peace. Breathe out the compassion and kindness that is within your heart. And imagine surrounding this person that you're holding in prayer in loving, caring compassion. See them being blessed by it, surrounded by it, enfolded by it, lifted by it. And know the truth that there is power in this work. That Spirit moves through each one of us as we are opening to that truth and being the change that we seek in the world. And so we breathe into the heart and we feel appreciation and gratitude and compassion, and we let it emanate from within us as we fill this sanctuary with this coherent, energetic signal, and it goes beyond the walls. And we know that every single one of us is here to stand in this truth, to be the one to bring peace to our world. And as we do, we give thanks for the opportunity to be the change in our world. And we let the beauty within us be expressed as our souls sing out in gratitude. And so it is. Amen.
My soul sings out to you, my love. My soul sings out to you. My soul sings out to you, my love. My soul
Awesome. All right, this is the last talk on the 5 principles. Principle number 5. But let's do a little review. So the first principle is, and how do we articulate that principle in unity? What do we say about that? There's one presence and one power active in my life and in the universe, God the good. And we affirm that every Sunday. And now I know that sometimes we have an exception to that principle. Anybody ever have an exception to the principle that there's just God going on? Well, that's why we have principle number 2. And what is principle number 2? We are the one. You know, we're created in God's image and likeness. We are divine. We are children of God. And so our purpose is to be here to make the difference. We are unto our world, just like Jesus, the Christ of God, unto our life. We are that one. We are it unto our own life experience. And that gives us a sense of empowerment because we need to understand who we are and who we've come here to be. And that leads us to the third principle, and that is we create our own personal reality. That's right. We create our own personal reality through our thoughts, through our behaviors, through our emotions, through our actions. And so it's the law of mind action. It's the principle that we co-create with God. And so if there's some aspect of our life that looks and feels against us, then we have to look inside of ourselves for our own sense of disconnect. And we can only have our life look and feel against us when we're not connected to our own sense of well-being and worth. Is that not the truth? When we are connected to our own sense of well-being and worth, we can have any kind of experience and we know it's for us. But when we're living in the disconnect, then we create out of that sense of not enough or out of that sense that we don't matter so much. And then we look out at our life and it looks and feels against us, but we don't recognize that we have helped co-create the very experiences that we would rather not have. But the good news is there's principle number 4, and what's that principle? We can transform our life through spiritual practices. And yes, prayer and meditation is an important aspect of that. But it's important for us to recognize that part of our God job is to transform our life. Because there's nothing out there in the world that wants us to be different than how we are in terms of our being subjected to a life that looks and feels against us. And so we have to overcome the belief in separation. We have to overcome the sense of being separate from life. And we have to look to spiritual principles and the way showers that have given us a glimpse of this dimension of ourself that is the reality of principle, the reality of spirit. And that leads us to principle number 5. And so today we're going to be talking about being the change. It's insufficient to know the truth. We must live it in our life. This is what principle number 5 tells us. We must live the principle. And so today my talk is called Choose Your Simulation. And so what I mean by that, it'll be a little bit more clear, but just for now, think about how much of our life is spent in an internal dimension of ourself that is kind of experiencing a simulation of life as opposed to us being present to our life as it is. So I'm going to, first of all, last Sunday when I was, just before I concluded my talk, I shared a video. How many of you were here last Sunday? Okay, so a lot of you weren't here last Sunday, so you didn't see the video. So let me just say what the video was, and then I have a little shorter version of the video, so you'll have a sense of what that was about. So Jane and I teach a class through Unity Worldwide Spiritual Institute called The Eye of the Storm. It's based upon a book that I've written. And we invite our students, after they've gone through the class, to participate in a 21-day, day-by-day reconciliation journaling process, similar to the Q process, but it's the Q Lite version. It's a little bit easier version. But meanwhile, they go through a 21-day process of reflecting each day back and seeing where in their life that they fail to live up to their own standards of integrity, being who they've come here to be, and to simply take it upon themselves to ask their heart, if given the gift of tomorrow, what would I want to do differently? What would be the difference that I would want to make, given I would have a chance for a redo? And so each of our students then experienced going through this exercise for 21 days, and then they developed a sense of what it's like to be present to each moment from your heart. And so part of the practice is that we go to our heart, just like we do every Sunday in our meditation, and really open our heart and really seek the guidance and wisdom of this dimension of ourself that is of a greater mind than our conditioned self. And then they tell their stories about what happens when they go to their heart and they begin to allow their heart to guide them into a different experience, otherwise different than what their conditioned self would tend to create or tend to want to generate instead. So I'm going to share this video of Steve, and he's going to be talking about his experience. And then guess what? We got their papers, their final papers, and Steve writes a little bit more about his experience, and I'm going to ask Jane to share that part of the story. So here's Steve.
So we were at a Rockies game, and we were in the middle of the row, and on one side there was a partition, so you could only get out of the row on one side. And so we had gotten up a few times to do various things, to walk around, get some food, drink, whatever. And the guy at the end of the row, kind of an older gentleman, maybe in his 60s.
What's up with that?
Finally, like maybe on the third time he got out, said, "Next time you'll have to crawl over me if you want to pass again." I couldn't tell if he was serious or joking or what, but I just kind of kept my cool and just, walked up the stairs. And so I started, thinking about, and of course the ego is more than happy to offer a lot of unpeaceful thoughts. I said, what's going on here? What's the storm? What did I bring here? And the thought that came in was about control and connection issues. And so I kind of went through that a little bit, and then I said, well, what do I recommend? Because I got to walk by this guy again. So what do you recommend? Because by this time I was really heart-centered, really quiet and calm. And so the thought that came in was buy him a bottle of water. And I thought, oh, well, yeah, no, shouldn't have to bribe them. I paid for the seat, and of course there goes the ego again. And so I just said, okay, all right, I'm going to buy him a bottle of water. And then about that time too, I got a download kind of this guy, just about, his loneliness issues and connection issues and some other stuff. And I knew I had connection issues too, so, this gift was just kind of about love. It wasn't a bribe. And so I ended up getting the bottle of water, so we came back to the seats, and I walked up to him, and he kind of looks up, kind of weary and grumpy, and so I handed him the bottle of water, and I said, here's a peace offering, brother. And man, the whole scene just changed. I mean, man, he jumped up like a little teenager, and he was all smiling, and he was all happy, and he started talking like a million miles a minute. But just in that moment, there was just such love. There was just such connection. It could have easily gone the other way. And so I felt it, he felt it, and then we ended up walking back to our seats. But instead, I really just kind of tapped into the heart that day, and it really showed me kind of a different way of living, a different way of experiencing and just being in a connection. It was just beautiful.
All right, so now we get his paper. We read his paper, and so Jane's going to do this part.
And yes, that was a cat around his neck. That was his cat, yes. So when we got his paper, we were surprised to see there were a couple more stories. We thought he would just tell that story on paper, because during that session, we had everybody share their story, and we said to them, that's great, write about those things when we get the paper, but he went beyond. So here's I'm going to read it verbatim, what he said. My girlfriend and I were on a patio eating dinner, and there was a group of loud girls at a table that were hitting the wine kind of hard. They were finished with dinner, but having some very passionate discussions. I think everyone on the patio was hoping they would quiet down. But the more we saw the cause as outside of us, the more raucous and obnoxious the behavior became and continued. I grabbed my girlfriend's hands and we said a little prayer and let go of negative beliefs we were holding on to. And we sent love to them. And then we continued our dinner. Suddenly, a big gust of wind came through, and honestly, it seemed to mostly hit the table where these girls were sitting. And since they were done eating, they just quickly gathered everything up and left. And then the wind just as suddenly died down, and the patio was back to being quiet and peaceful. That's one story. One more story had me at another restaurant, and the hostess told us that their patio was open seating. So I stood by a table on the patio waiting for the busser to come by and clean the table. And while I was standing there, an older lady, probably 60 or so, fast walked over to me and said that that was their table, and the hostess told them they could have it. Well, I realized that the other gal in their group that had gone to ask the hostess was actually behind me. So I was actually next in line for that table. But I was in peace and love that day, and when I looked deep into her eyes, I almost teared up because I could feel her inner turmoil and her fear and her anxiety, and I immediately relinquished the table to her. We ended up going inside, and about 15 minutes later, it started to rain really hard. I'm not saying that Spirit rained on them, but I think Spirit knew it was about to dump, and it would not be fun trying to gather up our dinner plates and drinks and cutlery and move into an already full bar. So sometimes I think we're guided away from unpleasant situations as well, and I think it's important to stay in our peace to get the most from life. And he ends by saying, I guess this is the bonus module from the eye of the storm.
Yeah, that's so cool. So wait a second. So the neat thing about this is that he wanted to make it plain and clear that he wasn't using his heart to try to control what life is all about.
Right, yes. He was just listening and following what his heart told him. And so, the message isn't that that when people are, if you send love to people that irritate you, a big wind's going to come blow them out of your life. Or that when somebody's being really difficult, that the rain's just going to pour down on them. But just the point that he's starting to listen just to what his heart tells him, and to really check in and ask, what's for me to do? Where should I go? What should I do? And having these amazing experiences happen. And as a side note, he told us he's going to be teaching the Eye of the Storm in his church now. So I think he'll do an amazing job at that. Anyway.
So the real important thing is to get that Steve was able to shift out of his autopilot, in other words, his reactive self. He acknowledged that he was triggered or he was bothered, but he knew what he needed to do. He needed to step out of the simulation that was being created by virtue of his annoyance about what was happening. And then he took an active step of getting heart-centered and then waiting for that message, that voice, that sense of, okay, this is where I need to come from. And when we give ourselves that kind of pause and be able to offer ourselves in the sense of being used by Spirit, connecting through our heart, then something else comes through that enables us to create a totally different outcome. I mentioned last time about the autopilot, and there's an aspect of our brain that routinely goes into the autopilot mode because it's the best way our brain for the brain, it's best for our brain to make sure that we're asleep because it does such a better job of maintaining us. And so, as I mentioned last time, System 1, these are actual terminologies associated with brain science. The System 1 brain is our autopilot brain. It's the part of us that moves very rapidly to making sure that we're safe and okay. This part of our brain, the autopilot, would rather be wrong 99% of the time than miss the one time it failed to protect us. But the problem is, it's not the autopilot. The problem is that we're asleep and we just allow the autopilot to create our life. And we talked a little bit about what the dynamic of the autopilot is in terms of consciousness. On one level, the primary function is to react, to make sure that we're safe. And so we talked last week about a cascade. When we're triggered, we actually go through a cascade where all the various systems within our brain begin to act very quickly to create a state of hypersensitivity with respect to how our life looks and feels in the outer. So when we're on autopilot, we're totally focused on how we're having our life. And there's very little, if none, no self-awareness at all. In addition to that, there is a dynamic of the autopilot that maintains the kind of status quo, that keeps us on the same course. And so our habits of being, having, doing, our habits of feeling, of believing, of perceiving, all of these are a part of the autopilot. And we can be in our life conscious and awake in a sense, but we can be living in the autopilot's routine and not be a sense of presence in our life. And therefore not necessarily think in terms of altering our state, or rather challenging what's going on in the simulations that are a byproduct of what the autopilot is all about. What I didn't talk about last Sunday, which goes to an important part of what I'm wanting to present today, and that is there is a neurological dimension of this very circuit that we can describe in the terms of our reactive self and the part of our self that keeps us on course. And that is, it's called the default mode network. It's a neurological system that keeps our brain in the autopilot mode because that's where it's most efficient. The challenge is that our default mode network doesn't necessarily have an altruistic dimension to it. It just simply wants to keep us safe at all costs. And one of the ways in which the default mode network accomplishes that is that it routinely runs simulations in our head. Now, we may think of those simulations as the stories in our head or the voice in our head. Have you ever walked along and found yourself deep in some kind of imagination or wondering and feeling kind of yucky because of it? Have you ever had that experience? And we have those experiences hundreds of times in each day, but they live as a routine in our head, and it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of our really believing that our whole state is being hijacked by an internal process of running simulations for the purpose of making sure we can predict and control our life. This is what our brain is designed to do, to run simulations that simulate our life is threatened by external circumstances, and so we have to pay attention. Now imagine when we're so focused on how our life looks and feels that we really don't have the other dimension of our capacity, and that is to be able to examine the contents of our habits of being, for instance, or examine the reactions that are produced by our triggering moments. We have no means by which to transform those methodologies without necessarily coming to terms with dealing with our default mode network. And so if we think about the part of us that is going into autopilot and then the part of us that is running simulations for the purpose of making sure that we're safe and okay, we have to override that circuitry if we're to actually create something that lives outside of our conditioned self. And so that's what I'm wanting us to look at next. And I'm going to share another video. And it's the content of this video is to focus on defining what our default mode network is, and the primary antidote or spiritual practice that counteracts the negative effects of our default mode network is meditation. In addition to meditation, There is also other activities such as Tai Chi and yoga, energy work, other things, other practices that we can do that take us out of our default mode network and out of the dimension of ourself that is on autopilot. And so watch this movie and then we'll have some fun.
There's no way a fidgety and skeptical news anchor would ever have started meditating were it not for the science. The science is really compelling. There's also a study out of Yale that looked at what's called the default mode network of the brain. It's a connected series of brain regions that are active during most of our waking hours when we're doing that thing that human beings do all the time, which is obsessing about ourselves, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, doing anything but being focused on what's happening right now. Meditators not only turn off the default mode network of their brain while they're meditating, but even when they're not meditating. In other words, meditators are setting a new default mode. And what's that default mode? They're focused on what's happening right now. In sports, this is called being in the zone. It's nothing mystical, it's not magical, you're not floating off into cosmic ooze. You are just being where you are. The cliche in these self-help circles is being in the now. You can use that term if you want, but because it's accurate, it's slightly annoying, but it's accurate. It's more just being focused on what you're doing. And the benefits of that are enormous. And this is why you're seeing these unlikely meditators now, why you're seeing the U.S. Marines adopting it, the U.S. Army, corporate executives from the head of Ford to the founders of Twitter, athletes from Phil Jackson to many, many Olympians, scientists, doctors, lawyers, school children. There's this sort of elite subculture of high achievers who are adopting this because they know it can help you be more focused on what you're doing and it can stop you from being yanked around by the voice in your head.
All right, wouldn't that be a superpower to have, not being yanked around by the voice in your head? And so if we are understanding that our brain, the autopilot part of us, the default mode network, constantly runs simulations for the purpose of keeping us safe, and if we can also kind of get that whenever we're in a simulation, in other words, we're not paying attention to what's here, but we're in some dynamic where we're living in a different reality, but still running an experience, a felt experience of living in this story that the story that is generated in our head. We need to understand that our brain does not know the difference between a simulation and a life experience. That in the context of what's going on in terms of our neurological self, our brain doesn't know the difference, but we know the difference. But if we're living in a simulation and we're experiencing all of its uncomfortable feelings, then our body is filled with the same chemistry as if we were triggered by an external event or circumstance. So that's why it's important for us to meditate, because what happens in our experience of meditating is that within 12 seconds or so, our mind wanders. And where does it wander? It goes into simulation. Our brain, every 12 seconds, wants to go into a simulation. And if we don't understand that's what our brain does, we'll go into the simulation, we'll still walk around and do our stuff, but we'll be thinking about some situation or some person, something at work, something at school, and it's making us feel awful or yucky, and we don't know that that's the simulation that's doing that. And if we're not awake and are able to see what the content of the simulation that is running our emotional state is, that's called being asleep while you're in autopilot. Remember the guy in the Tesla who was asleep? It's not that the Tesla was on autopilot that's the problem. The problem was the driver was asleep while it was in autopilot. That's the problem. And the problem for us is that we're asleep while we're in autopilot. And so I want to share a story, and this is a recent story. I routinely go on walks every day, and I listen to a meditation tape, Dr. Joe Meditation Blessing of the Energy Centers #3. I do this, and I've done this every day for the last 3 years. And I just pop the earbuds in, I'll listen to it, and while I'm listening, I'll go into simulations intentionally just to discover what is in the content of my internal state, so I know what's in there that I have to work on. And I became conscious of running a simulation about imagining them bringing our tiny house up to our property in Kettle Falls. Now, our tiny house is 15 and a half feet tall, and all along the road up to Kettle Falls are all these bridges that say 14 feet 7 inches. 14 feet 12 inches or 9 inches. The point is that every time I'm driving to Kettle Falls, I'm in a simulation worried about whether or not the house is going to make it undamaged. And I wake up in that simulation and I feel all the tension in my body, the tightness, the anxiety, the worry, and recognize that this is a simulation. And so then I decide what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can get my higher self to run a simulation through the various circuits that are in my brain. And so this time I'm walking and I stop and I get heart-centered, open up myself to the presence of spirit, this beautiful forest of woods behind us where we live. And I'm just there, and then I start walking again. I'm still listening to Dr. Joe, but I've lost any sense of where that is, and I'm just paying attention, and then I go into another simulation, right as I'm walking. Now, I'm still walking, listening, but now I'm in another simulation. I go back to my previous marriage with Nan, and she's in the process of dying, and I'm aware of my sadness over not being able to have the conversation with her because her brain cancer has gotten to the extent where she no longer has the cognitive capacity to have the kinds of conversations about loss, about dreams. And I saw myself in that place of extreme sadness for not being able to speak those words or have that conversation. And then at the same time, I also saw how at the time I did not adequately hold myself in a loving care, having experienced such a depth of hurt for not having been able to have this kind of exchange that would have had some completion for me. And so in that moment, I stopped again and gave myself a heavy dose of compassion and really holding Gary in a way that I have never done that for myself before, and really felt a kind of taking in a part of me that has been outside of myself for so long, and then recognizing that I was in a simulation that my higher self created for me. I would never have chosen to go back to that moment, but because I was able to recognize that the simulation circuits are there to be used, why not let my higher self use those circuits to give me a simulation that can translate into integration and healing, as opposed to a simulation that is just going to drive my nervous system wild. And so I left that experience recognizing that part of the message that my higher self was wanting to convey to me is our job is that we have to reprogram the autopilot. We have to reprogram those circuits that run us when we're not conscious. And we have to reprogram our default mode network, because that's what keeps us locked into all the self-condemnation, all the self-loathing, all the evidence that we've gathered lives in those circuits that utilizes that evidence, that meaning-making, to hold us in a place of you better be on the lookout. And when we begin to work against that and let go of that and enter into spiritual practices, beginning with the heart, opening the heart, and then bringing in the mind's clarity and its capacity to see and be the pilot of ourself, then we bring ourselves into a greater expression of who and what we've come here to be. And so I'll just simply end by this. Typically in a church service, those kinds of sounds would be unsacred, right? Annoyances. But we can spiritualize it. We can spiritualize any interruption by just coming up with like $100 fee for when a phone goes off. And then we would welcome it, wouldn't we? We would welcome it. It wouldn't bother us at all. This is what I mean by choose your simulation. God bless you.
I am convinced that we are not here by accident, but by divine appointment. And I just have to share right now, I'm in my 42nd year of education. And this year, for the first time, I'm able to teach meditation to our staff 2 times a week, North Central High School, holding the presence. So more people know now. All right. Unity stands for peace in the presence of conflict, for love in the presence of hatred, for forgiveness in the presence of injury. Unity honors the many names for God, the many paths to God, for we know that there is only one power, one presence, and one life. So whoever you are and wherever you are on your journey of transformation, you are welcome here. We would especially like to welcome anyone who is here for the very first time. If you feel comfortable, and raise your hand. Our ushers have packets for you. So we have a couple right here and here. Yes, and welcome. Welcome, welcome. On the outside of the packet, there is a form for you to fill out, be added to our mailing list for our weekly e-news update and our quarterly newsletter. If you are interested, please fill it out and drop it in the love offering bag as it comes around instead of feeling obligated for a donation. Also, after the service, you can take your packet to our barista stand and get a free beverage of your choice. And then you can also take it to the bookstore to receive a CD of today's talk. If you have any questions or would like a name tag, please visit our information desk and speak to one of our welcome team members. We are glad that you are here. So now is the time for us to welcome each other with a handshake, a hug, a high five, a wave, a namaste, a curtsy. I always like that one. Whatever works for you. And we will begin with our welcome song
But
today.
stand, if you could, guys, we're going to sing Swing Wide the Doors. Swing wide doors, the time is right. Swing wide doors, burning the light. Waiting on humankind. Swing wide doors, his heart and mind. Swing wide doors, the time is right. Swing wide doors, burning the light. Waiting on humankind. Swing wide doors of his heart and mind. Go ahead and each other up, down, 29 times. swing like yours, to day and night, waiting along for you midnight. Swing wide the doors of his heart and mind. Swing wide the doors of his heart and mind. Yes, yours and mine today.
I'm just getting better and better at that. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Sledge. I have the privilege of being the treasurer on your board of trustees, and this is a time of our community giving, where we receive your gifts and your offerings with great love, and we know that those go forth into our community, not just here, but the greater community as well. And for that person who's phone went off, I am the person that money comes to. So I'll see you afterwards. So let's take a moment to center ourselves in our heart as we share our prosperity blessing together. Together, I know that my giving blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I give and receive. I give thanks for the abundance that is mine to share, and so it is.
All right, everybody, this is the last of our one service, summer service, and we're back to 2 services, so we're going to just give you a fun song to go out of summer on. And the message here is to dig into all the things that our spiritual center has to offer this fall. We have all of our classes and all of our trainers and all of our prayer vigils and all of our music, and so dig into it, because there's a lot here, right? Right. Yeah, okay. This could be a better song. A new route to thee, where I want to be. I want to dig a little deeper in the storehouse of God's love. Well, I want to shine with love sublime. Well, I want to dig a little deeper in the storehouse of God's love. Well, I want to dig a little deeper in God's love. Dig a little deeper in God's love. I want to dig a little deeper in the storehouse of God's love. Well, I want to talk just like my sisters would, and walk just like my brother should. I want to dig a little deeper in the storehouse of God's love. And I want to do, you keep quiet, what's always true. I said I want to dig a little deeper in the storehouse of God's love. Well, each passing hour, well, I want more power. Well, I want to dig a little deeper in the storehouse of God's love. Yeah, I want to dig a little deeper in God's love. I want to dig a little deeper in God's love. I want to dig a little deeper in the storehouse of God's love. Well, I want to talk just like my sisters would, and walk just like my brother should. I want to dig a little deeper in the storehouse want to dig a little deeper, don't you? In the storehouse of God's love, and if that's right, I will to know as on we go. Well, I want to dig a little deeper in the storehouse of God's love. All right, let's rip it down. I want to dig a little deeper in God's love. Dig a little deeper in God's love. Oh, dig a little deeper in the storehouse of God's love. I want to walk just like my sisters would, and talk just like my brother should. I want to dig a little deeper to the storehouse of God. The storehouse of love. I want to dig a little deeper. The storehouse of God's love. God's love, yeah.
Yes. Let's just bless those love offerings. We give thanks for these gifts for those who have given them as we send them forth to bless our world. Amen. Thank you. And today our chaplains are Marlene, who's walking down the aisle, and Charles. And Charles, you've been holding space to, and Diane. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I wasn't looking. My peripheral vision was out. So, yes, and so, and Charles was holding space. Or Marlene was holding, oh, whatever. I direct this program, can you tell? Anyway, we are available today. People will be here to either in celebration or in anything that's concerning on your heart. And we want to know that you are supported. And I want to thank you very much for your service today. You can also fill out a prayer request found form in your seat pocket in front of you and put it in one of our prayer boxes. One is in the back of the sanctuary and one is in the foyer out there. Our prayer team will pray on it with you for 7 days and then send it back to Silent Unity where it's prayed on for 30 days. And if you know of someone who is in the hospital and has requested a visit from one of our chaplains, please fill out the visitation form in the back and also put that in the prayer box. So now is the time for our children to come in.
We are singing for His love is all right. We are singing for His love is all right. We are singing for His love is all right. We are singing for His love is all right. We are singing, oh, we are singing for His love is all right. We are singing, oh, we are singing for His love is all right. We are singing for His joy is all right. We are singing for His love is all right. We are singing for His joy is all right. We are singing for His joy is all right. We are singing, oh, we are singing for His joy is all right. We are singing, oh, we are singing for His joy is all right. We are singing for His joy is all right. We are singing for His joy is all right.
We are grateful for all of our young people here at Unity Spiritual Center. Let's take a moment right now to bless these beautiful beings. Be the love you are, sing the song you hear, share your joy of life with people far and near. And then let's hold that for ourselves. Be the love we are, sing the song we hear, share our joy of life with people far and near. All right. right, and if you could all be dismissed to be with people who brought you here today. And now, please stand if you are able and join us for our closing prayer, followed by the peace song. The light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love of God. The power of God protects us. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well, and that's the truth. And sing the peace song.
So remember, your job is to wake up when you're in a simulation, do a heart lock-in, meditate, do some yoga, some tai chi. That'll get you there. See you next time. God bless.